So my presentation today is about these two terms, i18n and l10n, so-called internationalization and localization. Before we start, let me present myself. My name is Andrei Pfeiffer. I live here in Timișoara. I work for SmileCloud Biometrics. It's a local product company from the dental domain, but I didn't switch to being a doctor. I still code, I still do design, I still do code design. So I do the same stuff I did before. I'm also co-organizer of tim.js and this meetup and Revo.js, the JavaScript conference here in Timișoara, and since last year I started to write technical articles on my personal blog, so you can check it out if you want to. Most of the articles are focused around JavaScript and UI development in general. These two terms that are in the title of my talk are so-called numeronyms. What are they? They are basically some abbreviation of difficult to write or to spell words. You might be familiar with some numeronyms like W3C. Probably you know what it means, right? World Wide Web Consortium, exactly. It's long to write and to pronounce, so the fact that we have three words that start with W, then we get this abbreviation W3C. Another one that you might be familiar with is A11Y. Accessibility, exactly. So how are these numeronyms composed? So basically you take a long word that you don't want to write or to spell, and you count the number of letters except the first and the last one, and you basically remove all those letters, and the number of the letters between the first and the last you basically put in between those letters. And this technique is used for i18n and l10n as well. Okay, another one that is less popular is this E15. Does anyone know what this abbreviation means? Sorry?
Some toxic ingredient from Coca-Cola.
No. No, but yeah, good one. No. It's this word. Know what this is? Yeah. Yes. It's a volcano in Iceland, the famous volcano that basically blocked all the aerial traffic a few years ago, if you recall. Yeah, doesn't have anything to do with the presentation. It was just a fun fact. So let's get back to our talk. Internationalization and localization. There's a slight difference between the two terms, so let's define what these two terms are. According to Wikipedia, the process of designing a software application so it can be adapted to various languages or regions without engineering changes is called internationalization. So basically this is the process that we have to make as engineers, as developers, to be able to support, to make the migration from one language to two languages. So probably if you ever had to do this, it's difficult to go from one language to two languages to be supported in a website or application. From 2 to 3, it's not that much of a deal, but going from 1 to 2 is a very big deal, because every little piece of text that you want to display, for instance, in your pages, it has to be dynamic based on a language that is selected by the user, right? So this process is a one-time process that happens, right? You only have to implement it at the beginning or whenever you want to make the support for multilingual, for multiple languages. In contrast, localization is the process of adapting internationalized software, so something that already supports multiple language support. So it's the process of adapting the software to a specific region or language by translating text and adding locale specific components. So this basically is an ongoing process that happens either when we want to support a new language, so you have to add a new language and translate all the content and make sure that all the components and all the pages are basically displayed properly for the new language or the new region. And also, when we add a new page or a new component, or we extend our system, our multilingual system, we have to make sure that those new added components basically fit and display properly for all the languages that are supported. So it's a very one-time process versus ongoing process. Now, we cannot talk about i18n without talking about locales. This is the basis for talking about localization. There are different ways to specify locale. A locale can have a short form. A locale is basically the string that defines the language or the region that we have to display our content in. So we have a short form. For Romanian, for instance, is RO. For English is EN, right? FR for French, DE for German, for Deutsch. But there's also the long form, the so-called long form, which contains the language and the region separated by a dash. Now, when you think about Romanian, it doesn't make a lot of sense to use the long form. But when you think about English, so the English language is spoken in US, in Great Britain, in Canada, in Australia, in New Zealand, in different regions of the world. And probably the majority of the language is the same, but there are some slight differences between those. For instance, just an example, in US and Great Britain, the word color is pronounced the same, but it's spelled differently. We also have longer locales. So for instance, for Serbian, so we have the Serbian region, the Serbian language as spoken in Serbia, the country of Serbia, not in Croatia, for instance, because in Croatia, for instance, Serbian is also spoken. But the content could be written in Latin or in Cyrillic, right? So a locale can also specify the alphabet that is used for that specific content. Right, we have different letters used for each locale. Now there are some advanced locales as well, right? We have these extensions, two extensions, T for transformed content and U for Unicode. Probably you're not gonna use them. I haven't used them at all during all these years, but I think it's interesting to know that they exist. For instance, when you have this locale n-t-jp, it means English content translated from the original Japanese, right? So whenever you encounter a T in a locale, you should know that it refers to translated content. Or we can have something like this, for instance, which translates basically the Hebrew language as spoken in Israel. And then we have the Unicode part. So this content uses basic Latin numerals, 0 through 9, so not the Hebrew numerals. It also uses the traditional Hebrew calendar, not the Gregorian one. And all the dates and times are displayed in Asia, Jerusalem time zone. So locales can get very, very specific. Probably, again, you won't encounter this, but just remember that they exist. So, there are, maybe you would find two different types of long-form locales. So the one with the underscore and the one with the dash. The one with the underscore is a so-called language tag. It's a standard that is used anywhere, not only on the web, but basically in any software that you would work with. The one with underscore is strictly specific to Java. It's so-called a Java locale. And so you shouldn't use this one. Also, Java has methods for converting the Java locale to and from the language, the standard language tag. So, do use that one. Okay. How can we get a user's locale? Well, since we are talking about web development, there is an object on the window object called navigator.language, and we have language and languages. Can you see it in the back? Yeah. Okay. So if we go to languages, then we get an array of languages. If we get the language, then we get the first option from the array. And of course, if I switch my language here from US to Romanian, and I try to get the language, I don't get Romanian, because the navigator.language doesn't return the operating system locale, it returns the browser settings. So if I go to Chrome, for instance, because I use Chrome, I go to settings and I search for language. And in language, I see that United States is first and Romanian second. So I can move Romanian to the top. And now if I want to get my language, now is in Romanian, right? So please just, oh, I shouldn't have removed that. Yeah, anyway, I don't have undo, Command Z, okay. So navigator.language, returns the browser's languages, not the operating system languages. This is in contrast to native applications, mobile applications or desktop applications, where because you have a native application that is executing, that runs on the operating system, basically you get access to the languages from the operating system. I've used this in React Native, so I know this applies to React Native, and I guess the same applies to Electron applications as well. I couldn't find any solution or any option to get the operating system locale from the browser or from a web application, because because the browser is an application, is an application on the operating system, and your web application is just an application inside the browser, which is an application in the blah 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 blah. Okay, inception. A big part of, or a big chunk of effort in implementing localized content goes to translations, and basically at one point you would need a framework to handle all the translations for you. It's a daunting task of building your own solution, so I will recommend definitely to use a framework. I have used i18n Next in several projects. It's a JavaScript internationalization framework, and we're gonna go through a very quick setup to see how easy it is to set up and to use. It is available in probably most technologies that you would use, not all of them. It's available on the server, and not only in the JavaScript ecosystem. It's also available in PHP, Rails, .NET, in mobile applications built with JavaScript frameworks or platforms, or without them, and in any JavaScript application as well. So yeah, it's very, very popular and widespread. If you go to supported frameworks, I will do the demo using React, so I will choose React i18 Next, and I don't want the GitHub repo, I want the documentation page, and we'll go to quick start, and they say, okay, install some dependencies. I have already done that, so we don't have to download anything more. And it says here configure, create i18 some file. Let's copy this content. And then it says, okay, import that file in my index.js. Okay, I will do that. And there are various ways to translate the content. This is specific for React. If you use it in Angular or other frameworks, you would have something specific to those, to your framework. You can use a hook, you can use a higher order components, but and other methods as well, but we don't care about that. So let's go to my very basic application. It displays basically currently a static text, and we have 3 buttons here. When I click them, it just displays, it alerts the locale, right? We have 2 locales for English Great Britain, English US, and Romanian. And we will implement everything in a second. So let's go and create that file. So I will create i18n.ts. I will use the ts extension because I use TypeScript. I will paste my content here. It's smaller. Okay, and I need to import this file in my index.js file. Import, oops, i18 next, not i18 next. I need to import this one from the local format. Okay, now let's analyze this file for a second. So we have some imports, okay, and then we have some inits here using this i18n framework, and we have an object, a resources object, and there is a comment here. I don't know if you can see the comment, but it says move them in a JSON file and import them, or even better, manage them separate from your code. So in a real Word application, you won't have the translations here in this file. You'll have them in a separate file, or even use a third-party platform to manage all the translated content. This is outside the scope of this presentation, but we can talk in detail about this because I have used various other platforms like this. But for the purpose of this talk, I will have all the translations here in this file. And basically, we have by default 2 languages, so English and French, and all the translations are some pairs, some key and value pairs, right? So let's translate this this content. Let's create one key. So we'll use the welcome key, and this key is gonna say hello tim.js in English, and the second language should be Romanian. So we'll also have the key welcome, and it says salut tim.js. Okay, let's format the code. Great, and now let's go to the component and let's translate this content, because currently is a static text. So I will have to import the hook from i18 next or React. I never know from which, probably from React, because it's a React specific thing. So this is a hook, use translation hook, and I will destructure from it. This is specific to React. Again, in your framework, probably you would have something different, specific to your framework. Here, this hook exposes a T function, a translation function. Basically, to this function, you pass a key from the translation, and will return the translation for the language that is set in the framework. So now, if I render here the function passing the welcome key, it will render something, probably. Let's see if I change the language. So by default, the language is in English. I can switch to Romanian, and it will display the translation for Romanian. So here, basically, you'll probably use something like navigator.language, right, to get the default language setting from the user. But let's see how we can switch the language from the application. So whenever I click the button, the framework, I should tell the framework to basically switch to another language. We can do this from here. So I have a non-change handler on these buttons, and currently it only alerts the language. But I need to tell the framework that, okay, you should change the language, right? So I need to import something from the framework again. So it is this function get i18n, which is a function that I need to call, and then I get a lot of methods and properties. One of them is change language, and I can pass the selected language to the framework, and now the buttons should work. Whenever I click on the buttons, the language should change. We can also pass the current language to this component, and we'll highlight the selected language. One other thing, let's say that we want this tim.js to be dynamic, so we can also do interpolation. we can remove this tim.js from here, and let's say it should display something dynamic, right? We should use a double curly brace syntax, and we can specify a name of a variable that should be received from the component. Let's say the variable should be name, and in our application we can, in our component, we can specify as a second argument an object and specify different different properties. So if I put a name property here, tim.js, it should display that that dynamic value. This could come from a database, or could be the name of the user or whatever. Okay. Any questions so far? No, everything is clear. Great. Let's move to some more interesting stuff. So let's display an input. So I have a basic numeric input here, and whenever I change this this quantity, I want to translate the word fruit, but to also have it pluralized, right? To display the plural form. Now, whenever the first time I had to implement this, I thought that the internationalization framework should know how to translate or to pluralize words in different languages. But English, I mean, probably this works in English because it's very basic. It has very simple rules, but in other languages it doesn't work. Sorry?
A lot of exceptions.
In English?
Break those rules.
Oh yeah. In other languages, of course, it's very tricky. So let's go to the i18n next website, and here on the bottom we have plurals. So let's see how to use plurals. So there are languages like English and also like French and German and Italian and Spanish, I think, that has one singular and one plural form. So for those languages, if you append _1 and _other, the framework knows that okay, for this key I know how to display the plural if I specify the quantity to the framework. So I specify key _1 or key _other, and then basically when I pass to the translation function, I pass the key label, and then an object with the property count. I have to use this property count and just pass the quantity, and the framework will do the translation for me. So let's implement this for English. So we have fruit _1 key, and for the singular is fruit, and _other, I think, right? One and other is fruits. And how I use this? Yeah, just a second. I don't need to use it to display it. I could do that, but the way I pass it. So instead of I use the translation function, I want to translate fruit, right? Because that's the key. That's the key here. Okay, and also I have to pass the count. I have to use this this property, and the count is this number. So now for 0, we have 0 fruits. Yeah, 1 is fruit, and then starting with the with 2, with the quantity of 2, it displays fruit, because that's the rule in English language and other languages as well, that that have one plural form. I can also choose to display the quantity here as well using double curly braces. We can display the count, and for the version for the singular, we can also use be a bit clever, display 1 fruit, right? Make sense? Okay. Now regarding plurals, this is also a numeronym for pluralization as well. Fun fact. So English, very simple rules, right? The rule is For singular, for quantity of 1, you have one form. For 0 and for more at least 2 items, you have the plural form. Now, in Romanian, for instance, things are a bit more tricky. We have 2 plural forms. So, 1, for the quantity of 1, we use the singular. Then for 2, so for 0, and from 2 to 19, we use the first plural form. And then from 20, we use the second plural form.
Applies to every noun in the language.
No, yes, I think so, I don't know. This is the rule. 20 de ani. Yes. Probably there are some exceptions, I don't know exactly, but this is the rule. Like, there is a very, very well written rule regarding this. And there are some languages that has 6 different different forms. So 5 different plurals and one singular. Now, how do you use these different plural forms in languages that have these multiple forms? Well, if we go to the documentation here a bit lower, we see that this title, languages with multiple plurals. So key 0, key 1, key 2, key few, many, and other. And if we scroll a bit more, how to find the correct plural suffix. And these guys from i18n next built this clever little helper that you can specify a locale, and it outputs how you should specify the keys. So for English, for instance, it's key 1 and key other, right? One singular form and the plural forms. And if we go to Romanian, for instance, we see that we have these 3 different keys that we need to specify. So key 1 for singular, key few for 0 and from 2 to 19, and more than 19 we have key other. Are you?
Yeah.
Key many, one, few. But Arabic, for instance, if we go to Arabic, then we have so many different. So when you have 2 items, they have a special form of the noun. When you have 100 items, they have another special form. So it's incredible. Okay, so let's implement this for Romanian. So one, few, and other. So let's copy this. Fruit 1, few, right? So we have un fruct. This is the singular. Fructe and de fructe. And when we go to Romanian, we have 0 fructe, un fruct, 2 fructe, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 16, 19 fructe, 20 de fructe. Da, deci practic framework-ul știe că limba română are aceste reguli gramaticale. Sorry. The Romanian the framework knows that the Romanian language has all these different plural forms, and it knows how to which key to use for the past for a specific quantity, right? Yeah, it's difficult. Languages are difficult, man.
Basically means that somewhere in the framework, few is defined differently for each language.
Yes. 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 Yes.
Someone studied it and for each language studied proper if else.
You need to keep the communication close. You just get it from
Yeah. And you know that grammar changes in time for each language, so that's another discussion probably. Okay, what about date and time? How to format date and time based on locales, and how to format those? Well, probably if you are using dates and if you are working with dates and times, probably you use some of these 3 libraries, or probably a similar one. All these libraries, moment.js, datef, and s, and date.js, they have support for localized formatting. So they have support to display and to translate all weekday names and the month and that stuff. So each all these libraries support that. But there is a better way to do that. There is a standard API in ECMAScript called Intl, from Internationalization, probably, that already has built-in support in browsers, Node.js, and whatever JavaScript environment you might need. For instance, for formatting dates and times, you can use the datetime format method. So let's do a quick demo of that. So let's display a date picker here. It is a default date picker from the browser. You can select a date, and we want to translate it in more or less this format. Currently, this text is hard-coded, but let's do formatting. So let's create a format function, format date function. Oh, Jesus, I don't know where that comes from. Format date function. We pass in the date, the selected date, and let's create this function here. Function format date. It receives a date of type date. It's a date object from JavaScript, and we can return I don't know how to spell this. It has different methods, datetime format. We can also format numbers, and we also have this plural rules. The plural rules basically displays all those keys that we talked about for any language. Okay, we'll use datetime format. This method receives two arguments: the locales, which is a string or an array of strings, and a configuration object. So let's get the current language from this method from the framework. Get i18n.language, and we will pass a configuration object in a second, and we will do we'll call it to format the date that we pass into the function. So by default, what it does, it translates, it formats the date in a standard format. So in Romanian, we use the day of the month first, and then the month, and everything is separated by a dot. In American English, you have the month first and the month day afterwards, right? And the separation is with slash, yeah. And in Great Britain, the order is just like in Romanian: day, month, and year, right? So it knows this method, basically the standard basically knows the way how to format dates in different locales. We can also, as I said, pass different configuration options. Let's say that I want the weekday to be long, the year numeric, month short, day numeric, and it knows to translate and to format all the different parts in the specific locale. So if I go to Romanian, I will see the Romanian translation, and I don't need a library just to format and to translate dates. What you can do with this at the moment, datetime format, display names, I don't know exactly what this is used for. List format, how you display different lists with different separators, I haven't used this. Number format, I've used this. You can format currencies and units of measurement and percent and all that stuff. The plural rules, relative time format, I don't know exactly what this means, what this does.
I think that's the thing that I was talking about.
Days ahead.
Or things like tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, mâine for mâine.
Probably, I have no idea. In a day, in a go.
Yeah, that's the one.
And it's basically an extensible API that can grow indefinitely. Okay, numbers as well. I won't go into any details. I had some short demo, but so number format basically can be used to format different decimals, currencies, percents, units of measurements. The support in browsers, it's supported for a long time, but because the API is so large, there are probably not all the options are available in all the browsers because they keep get added and added. But being an API, it is very easy to polyfill. So you just in case the browser that you want to support doesn't have support for this standard. In Node.js, it's built in, starting with version 13. And in React Native, it's disabled by default because it's a pretty large API. It has a few megabytes, but you can just flip a flag and from false to true, and you get support for internationalization in React Native. So basically, two takeaways to make an application to give support for multiple languages on an application. It's a one-time job. The internationalization process itself is a one-time job, and it's basically a pure engineering effort. In contrast with localization, which is an ongoing process, and it also involves some engineering effort, but also a language expert involvement as well, because you need a person that understands the language, the region, and the culture of that specific language that you want to translate and to display the content in. And basically, this is probably the number one takeaway. This standard API, you can use it in applications that don't need also in applications that don't need multilingual support, because you can use it to format dates without importing a separate library. If we take a look at, if you are using Moment, who uses Moment.js here? Quite a lot. Okay, so I don't know if you paid attention to the Moment.js website. It says here like this: considering using Moment in your project, there are better modern alternatives. For more details and recommendations, see the project status page. Let's check out the project page. Modern web browsers and Node.js expose internationalization and time zone support via the Intl object, codified as blah blah. Okay. Recently, Chrome DevTools started showing recommendations for replacing Moment for the size alone. We generally support this move. So Moment.js supports that you should not use. Yes. We now generally consider Moment to be a legacy project in maintenance mode. It is not dead, but it is indeed done. So unless you need to do some time calculations, which is not available at the moment as a standard API, then you don't need a separate library. Also, regarding time calculation, there is this proposal, temporal, which is in development, so it's not fully released yet. It's in stage 3 of the standardization process. This API would basically make any date-related library completely obsolete. Yeah, exactly. This is also a polyfill, and it's not a production-ready polyfill at the moment, but it should be polyfillable in the near future. So basically, we would have built-in support and native support for date and time, finally, within the web platform. But not yet. So thank you so much for listening. Hope this was useful. And if you have any more questions, okay, so thank you. Thank you.